Welcome, everybody, to another episode of CX on Point with Precision Point Partners. We're here with Ken Epstein, and I am Alicia Leszewski. What's up, Ken?
Hey, how you doing, partner? It's always good to see you on these. We have so much fun, don't we?
We do. I feel like we're gonna just have to go into a podcast studio, so we're not in each other's houses so much. But we're excited. This is gonna be a good one. Today we're excited. We've got Graham Tutton with us today. He is the founder and president of his own consulting and advisory firm. But before that, he was a senior executive, loving all things CX for AT&T and Comcast, to name a few companies. And we're excited because he's an expert on everything from customer experience to employee experience and how to bring all of those things together to really deliver greatness. But what I think you're going to like most about Graham, as I've spent a little bit of time with him, is that he says "so what" a lot. And I think that's the right amount of sass for this podcast, right, Ken?
So what? Yeah, it is. It is. It's
What?
always great. I always enjoy my conversations with Graham. He does say "so what" a lot. We'll get into that a little bit today. But Graham, thanks for joining us. So it's good.
Oh, it's a privilege to be here. Ken and Alicia, thank you for the invite. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, you've had a very interesting career, and it looks like it's taken a couple of turns as you came out of the big corporate world and did what so many of us do, but become a private entrepreneur and offer your advisory services and consulting and your purview on things. I might just say, so what? We'll get to that. But let's start at the beginning. How did you enter the CX space and why?
Yeah, it's kind of a circuitous route. I came out, all kidding aside, I was a German major in school. And so learned the language, learned the literature and the economy, all of that. And I started my career as an intern with AT&T overseas. And right then and there, you heard, I'm not a data guy. I don't have a math or an econ or stats degree by any stretch. But when I was with AT&T as an intern, it was really doing the research as to what our clients or customers or employees saying. What do they need? And this was back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Toward the turn of the century, yeah.
Pretty much. I mean, they were just inventing the phone back then. But all kidding aside, as I went through that and was understanding needs and understanding what made people make a choice, good, bad, or otherwise, it was understanding what was the behavior? What was the behavior of customers? What was the behavior of an organization? And that just fascinated me. And when I left and started with AT&T full time, I was in the contact center environment, both for the universal card as well as some of their business ops. And it was really understanding how, again, customer behavior, what we said as an organization to customers that prompted them to stay with us. And understanding the drivers or understanding the key levers to push and pull to make those interactions better, that was just fascinating. And so there was a science to it that you could measure and monitor and survey and all that. But the art, to use that cliche, was really, how do you apply it? How do you apply it to an individual who sits on the phone and takes 60 calls a day? Or on the other side of the spectrum, to an executive that's trying to drive operational efficiency and revenue gains, et cetera. And so all that created this environment of understanding how do humans' interactions and drive behaviors that then help the business as well as the individual.
We have always looked at what drives, let's say in a call center environment, what drives an agent to be successful, and measuring quality and measuring CSAT and everything else. It's also important, I think, to have them measure themselves and measure their peers so that there's an internal, almost like a CSAT internally, like do you like working here? Do you know, that sort of thing too. But relative to customer experience, I mean, share some of your thoughts on the current state of customer experience or experience in general, actually.
Yeah, I would say, and I've said this many times, customer experience recently, the whole term has just been completely diluted. And if you go back to, way back when, you think about the various movements around understanding customer and employee behaviors. There was the total quality movement. There was the value add or value proposition, satisfaction and loyalty and the like. And I think experience in its heyday was a combination of all that. How do you understand all facets of a relationship between customer and organization, or even between individuals? Because at the end of the day, this is about relationships, whether it's personal or professional. And how do you understand that? I would say here in the last few years, call it 2 or 3 years, experience has taken on client success, sales, account management, or what have you. Because yes, they're trying to understand the human behavior, but it's really around a sales function and account management function. And again, not exclusive to that. And there's a part of me that warms my heart that everything's experience, but then there's a part of me that says, not so much, because experience helps fuel all those operations. And so I would say it continues to evolve, and I think that's a great thing, because I look at organizations, whether it's the Comcast or AT&Ts, the Amazons, or again, fill in the logo, that are doing it well, that experience has to be absorbed into an organization, and it can't just be a department in its most mature state. But we can talk more about how that.
Well, there we go. Alicia, there's that word again, evolution, right? It just seems to come up almost every one of our episodes. We do end up talking about evolution, which is good, because the business, like all businesses, has evolved just tremendously. On the experience piece, think about it. If you want to go back before the turn of the century, the bar has been raised, lowered, moved to the left, moved to the right. This is what's a good experience. That's what a good experience. This is what a good experience. And I know we've talked about this. And what do you mean when you say so what? I mean, as it relates to, programs and groups in the CX world.
Yeah. So right or wrong, my teams have either hated it or eventually got to like it. Because again, you think of it from a leadership position, and you think of it from anywhere. Experience has historically been market research, so to speak. What's the data say? What are the drivers? What's the stat sig? Blah, blah, blah. And the number goes up, the number goes down, the number stays flat. So what? What are you doing? What does it mean that the trend is positive or flat or negative? What does that mean to the organization? Not just operations, but product, marketing, sales, finance. And how do we tie this all together in a meaningful fashion that an engineer who does not typically have direct contact with a customer understands that product reliability or network quality is important to the experience? Because if that fails, there's typically a call into the contact center, a technician role, or a churn opportunity. And deciphering that, why should I care? And so what? Again, regardless of function. And it has to do from executive level all the way down to frontline, and whether it's the organization itself or its partners, that is very important.
Yeah, and one of the things that you mentioned, which I think is really important and gets often overlooked, is churn. Companies invest just millions and millions of dollars to acquire new customers, and then once they get the new customer, they seemingly don't invest as much in keeping that new customer as they did to get it. So sometimes the back door is open as wide as the front door was. And, experience also should mitigate customer defection. Actually, what you really want to do is try to create customer evangelists if you can, or at least advocates. So it is very, very important. Assuming one size doesn't fit all, how do you gauge an organization's readiness for CX, either implementation or evolution?
Yeah, and it's a classic approach for any advisory or consulting work. Is you first got to figure out, where are we? Where are we in terms of maturity level, technology, process, activation of it all? And then what have they done and where do they want to go? And Ken, what you just said is really spot on. Most organizations will be focused on growth, retention, profitability, OpEx, and the like. Oh, by the way, their brand, because there's no shortage of stories of brands being decimated by poor customer experiences. What I look at is how are they doing it? And in very generic terms, if I'm just measuring, I got a customer sat number and I put it on a report, fantastic. That's low maturity because it doesn't answer the question, so what? What are you doing with it? Why aren't you doing something with it? Then I look, and many organizations over the last 2 decades have gone well beyond that. I mean, you look at the Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, Global 2000, the vast majority have some form of measurement and satisfaction, net promoter, level of effort, have that indicator. But again, many, in that, not an indictment, don't have the capability or capacity to say, what do I do with this? So what? What do I do with it beyond a report? How do I trickle that into all the functional areas and talk about it not as a function, but as a mindset and as a culture? So when we make decisions on product release, operational changes, etc., the voice of customer, voice of employee, and voice of market are all infused into that. And depending on how those answers or how that is being activated within an organization gives me low to high maturity levels.
No, we had horrible CSAT scores. So what? So we're losing 3/4 of our customers. That's so what? I mean, there are some pretty big so whats that you have.
Exactly.
You have
And you
to
can use it,
account for.
and you use it as a warning system or a radar. If you got low CSAT, people are not going to be inclined to leave. And whether you're a monopoly or whether you are a very hyper competitive market, you want to use it to understand buying behaviors, retention behaviors, and how we can fine tune that down below. And I think it's important, one thing that we've talked a little bit about here, but this whole concept of happy employees make happy customers, make you more money. It's the employee customer profit chain. And really a very mature organization has that. Understanding, regardless of level of an organization, what's driving employee satisfaction or NPS, how that is aligned to customer satisfaction at NPS, and then what does that do to growth, retention, and the like. And hyper mature organizations have gotten there and are actively working on dialing in the calculus that says these employees affect these customers, affect this type of profitability, and the like.
Yeah, it's a full equation you have to look at. You can't look at it in individual pieces, and the whole thing gets cobbled together and builds a puzzle. And you have to look at the whole puzzle, and then you have to look at the individual pieces of the puzzle to see if you can find defects and then account for those.
Absolutely. And again, and you know this, and I think the vast majority of people watching will know, that isn't a point and click exercise. That is a multi-year, highly focused approach or initiative. But once it's done, so to speak, it's never done. Once it's established, then it is that continual cycle, so you can fine tune it. And then it gets into, financial sides of it. What does it do to customer lifetime value? What does that do to profitability? Oh, earnings per share and all those things. All of that can be aligned to it accordingly.
Alicia is one of the foremost authorities, in my opinion, on branding, building brands, maintaining brands. Alicia, you're hearing this. How does this change what you have to do from a branding perspective when a company goes one direction or the other?
I think it takes a few different ways. I mean, I think some of the things that you say, though, I believe, and obviously brand ethos is that the brand of the company is what it shows the outside, what it shows the inside, what the customers feel, what the vendors feel, and everything. And you can have really, in my world, we can have really great website data, but so what if it's not moving the needle on sales or whatever. I have a client now that's hilarious, and she's in the space too, and she was like, it's not about just giving each other a high five, right? And I think that is the context that I put it out with a brand. And if it's not resonating with the right messaging, then it's nothing more than an art project with like the graphics that we produce, things like that.
Yeah, and then you have to go back and rebrand sometimes if somebody ruins it. If there's bad experiences, you have to go, and you are the fireman. You have to go put out that fire. So
right. Exactly right. So, but so I think it resonates on several different levels.
Building on what you just said, one of the approaches I profess, so to speak, is leveraging technology, which gathers signals and gathers information. And then there's intelligence or interpretation, which isn't just stats. It's more of what's the story? What's it mean from a brand personality, from an attraction, exec awareness. And then how do you activate that? And again, that goes back to that cycle. So leverage tech, intelligence or insights to activation, and that we keep that cycle going in parallel with the employee customer profit chain.
So what are some of your principles or foundations of experience? Does it apply to other areas besides customer and client, say employee or product? I know we touched on this.
Absolutely. I would say the employee experience in, one of the big ahas when I was at Comcast, and I think we all as a leadership team recognize this, we were so focused on transactional performance and from a customer to organization. But not until we started understanding and monitoring and managing the employee experience at the front line, supervisor, manager, and all the way, did we see this acceleration of not only adoption of customer experience or NPS, but also the impacts and the results. We saw empowerment and engagement from employees go up. We saw things like first contact resolution go up. We saw customer sat go up, and there goes that linkage.
Right.
And at first, organizations are like, well, we got our employee engagement studied, and we do that once a year. That's great. That's your relationship with your employee. But just like you do with your customer, how are the transactions? And realistically, what I've seen, not just at Comcast, but almost all clients I've done employee and customer work, is that you can use the employee transactional, and again, regardless if it's frontline or finance or engineering or whomever, it's a early warning system for what's going to upset your customer. And then utopia, a la maturity, is that you can use the employee transaction or the employee measurement as a predictor of your customer sat at transaction, and then also at your relationship level and brand. One of the organizations that I worked with, we actually got it down to a time frame. That employee transaction, that satisfaction level, was a 2 to 4 week predictor of customer satisfaction. Customer satisfaction at the transactional level was a 30 to 45 day predictor of relationship. And then the relationship was a quarter predictor of what the brand did as measured by JD Power or by brand assessment.
For years, as operators ourselves, we always did ESAT surveys on a quarterly basis, employee satisfaction, because if you want to drive a good experience for a caller, a customer, or anybody contacting you, you have to be positive. You have to be happy with what you do. If you're an unhappy employee and you're interacting with a customer, it comes off, and it's really hard to have that big smile on your face. So we did regular ESAT, quarterly ESAT surveys, and a lot of skip level interviews too, because it sometimes rots from the head down. You really have to understand leadership and how leadership is interacting with the folks beneath them, and is that a healthy environment and healthy relationships? So there's a lot of moving parts here that you have to get your arms around.
Exactly. And it's interesting to build on my so what. One of the organizations I've been a part of, we did the measurement and the transactional, and we found that technology and communicate, all the classic things, were getting in the way of an employee's ability to be engaged at the employee SAT or employee NPS. But we also found that it was the systems. We could communicate and we could talk and we could do pep talks and we could do incentives, but it was systems and process and policies that got in the way. And so we said, okay, we ran into a little bit of a wall of trying to morph those because of all the history. What we did was then start taking manager or executive leaders and bringing them to the front line. And that's not unique, but you put them on the phone next to an agent who has to swivel between 5 to X number of screens, talk to a customer, and then follow a process. And you want to see a bunch of executives start to beat up, put them on the phone and tell them to drive.
Certainly, you know, from a quality assurance perspective, all of those agents have to spend time on the phone every month, a certain amount of hours, and it is really important. You know, even as a senior C-level person in a contact center, I listen to calls all the time, and I was always on the floor because that's where the rubber hits the road. And if it's not working out in the contact center environment, then it's just not working. That's where everything starts.
What you described there is the so what of the culture of experience. Because, you know, again, not pointing to you, but how many times have we witnessed executives or leaders saying, this is what they need to do and you need to do it. Get out there, live it, hold their hand, sit in their shoes. And that is a cultural adoption, which obviously has mind and heart and all that into it. But what you can also do is formalize it. And I've done this with a couple of clients. And what they've done is this process and those that are very mature in it hold their leaders accountable for spending a day in the contact center, a day in a retail environment or wherever per quarter. And if they don't do it, their incentives are calibrated down or handicapped.
Experiential based training really is what it all boils down to. It's
and it drives the behavior. And yes, there may be some incentives of financial behind it, but at the end of the day, it connects top to bottom, you know, left to right, etc.
The other thing that we found and really encouraged, and a lot of companies don't, is the folks that are actually in the trenches. Ask them, how should we do this?
Yeah.
What are we doing wrong? Give them a voice, let them have ownership. It's their day that they have to, you know, deal with every day. It's their calls that or interactions, however they are, that they have to deal with. And a lot of times amazing ideas from the folks who are on the floor get overlooked because people now not just an agent, you know, we're not, and you have to have focus groups and you have to hear from them. What do they, not only what do they hear, what do they feel? Because you get a lot from what people are sensing. You know, we look at you know, tools like voice analytics, right, where it can do emotion detection. Words aren't being said, but they are.
Yeah.
And so we learn a lot just from listening. And the folks who are listening every single day, they know an awful lot. So I think it's really important to continually, not only from the standpoint of getting good insights, but you have to make them feel like they own it too. It's their client, it's their program, it's their company. It's very important.
And their voice is heard. And again, as an example of that, and I can call this one out, at Comcast, we, again, Comcast, enormous organization, multiple millions of customers. We had roughly 40,000 customer service agents around the world. And I deemed it the Comcast black hole. Great ideas came from the front line, agents, soups, managers, and they'd go up as suggestions and
So
so what we did as an organization is created elevations, different than escalations. We had an elevations process that we used all the signal gathering, surveys and speech analytics and the like, and all the analytics. And we identified drivers, and we were also calling customers back every day. If they had we use the Net Promoter System. If they were passive or detractors, we would call them back and try to do it within a 72-hour window. Long story short, both of those points give us intelligence, and then we'd review it with the agents, what the customer said, what was good, bad, different, and that would create issues. And I mentioned earlier how we've had policy issues or product issues or profit, whatever. We found that the suggestions, to your point, Ken, that came from the agents had to be vetted, and we created a system. We used Jira process flow management to input it and monitor it and communicate it. And then we ultimately created an elevations process that company-wide, we had something like 14,000 elevations over a 4-year period, of which 80% were resolved, either through change of process, product enhancement, or, you know what, great idea, but no, we're not going to do that for this reason. Again, part of the culture in getting that voice of the frontline and employee systematically through the organization. That was very, very impactful.
And even outside of CX, I'd started at Extended Stay America years ago with the team that had built Blockbuster, and we would go into the hotels. Our COO, Rick Fidel, would go in with a fake name, obviously, his room, wherever we were landing. And so, because he didn't want the focus groups or whatever to be planned, right? Like he just wanted everything to be raw, and it was great. And that connection is, I think, what fueled the growth for Extended Stay. When we were 0 to 310 hotels in 3 years, and it would not have been possible had the leadership, I'm talking the officers of the company, not been so hands-on and connected to the frontline teams. So I think even if outside of the call center, I think just that principle can go a long way.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think building on that is critically important to do that, but also then bring it back to the employee and bring it back to the organization, leadership or otherwise, to say, this was not, we weren't trying to catch you, but it was more of how can we support you? And I think that balance of listening and learning and acting to we're trying to get you. And that's some of the cultural and mindset biases that I find across organization, that, leadership just wants us to do this. And how do you position it? I think is very important.
Yeah, no, he knew them by name, a lot of the front desk, and by the managers, and then he'd send them a handwritten note or an email afterwards. It was truly that power. I call it the power just of connection and really understanding, they're just trying to do their jobs, and nobody knows that voice, or especially when you're staring at somebody that might be unhappy with their experience, and then their empowerment to make a heroic recovery out of a situation that might not have been to the expectations of the customer originally. And it's that heroic recovery kind of in hospitality that is magical, with customer loyalty.
You just defined kind of the ultimate so what for me is when you do that, regardless of your position in the organization or as an advisor, when you see that light bulb go off in an employee or a customer that says they care and they're doing something about, kind of closing that loop, there is nothing that gives me more joy than that, professionally.
It's not only voice of the customer, but it really is also voice of the employee, voice of the floor, our voice. What's our voice? What are we hearing? And that often gets overlooked. What are some of the most notable or memorable experiences you've had on advising or leading organizations CX work?
Some of the most powerful moments or memorable moments around experience is when you're talking to an individual or a group and you can hear them say, I get this. This is what I'm trying to do. And thank you for giving me a path to get there, whether it's measurement, whether it's a system or what have you. But again, the most powerful moments are when we implemented with a client calling customers back, and we would listen to those calls. And they weren't sales calls and they weren't justifying what we were doing. It was more of how did we do and what can we do better? And just hearing someone say, thank you for taking the time and getting notes back. That absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I think, again, I don't want to, self-promote, but one of the things we did at Comcast was really, we were dead last in JD Power. And JD Power is great. It's got all kinds of, history, etc. But many people look at it. And if you're at the bottom, you're not liked. We went from dead last to winning it over a 4-year period. And it was absolutely powerful. And less about the trophy and the recognition, but more for the organization saying, see, we as an organization get it. We just needed to figure out how to do it better so people understand it. That was very powerful.
You know, I never forget, and Alicia, you may remember this, and we did some work with excuse me, media and entertainment company, won't name them. And the research showed that the callers that called them would rather be calling the IRS than calling their local cable company. So there was something definitely broken, and there was a lot of work to be done. And I think it's come a long way, by the way, because it used to be the butt of a lot of jokes. But you know what? There's a lot of competition right now. There's a lot of ways to measure things. So what? And you have to be on your game, because if you don't, you end up finishing second, which is almost like being the first loser.
Measurement is one piece of the puzzle, because you have to have the data to point you in the right direction. But having leaders think not only about the numbers, but the environment and the process and the people that you have to affect, that's the magic. And that is the so what of how do we bring it to that next level.
Graham, I love it. So what if I love it?
Your voice is important, Ken.
I'm going to be saying that all day now. You know that.
So that wraps up another episode of CX on Point, and hopefully you'll tune in again for the next one. And absolutely, Graham, we'll be seeing you again in a few months, and we'll actually, so what if we're going to see you in a few months, right, Ken? Now I'll never say those two words again the same way. So, all right, everybody, make it a great day. Thanks for joining.